Hello, everyone. Welcome to Decoding Downtowns, brought to you by Vistity. In this podcast, we dive deep with leaders from business improvement districts across the nation, revealing the strategies that are shaping the future of urban development and economic growth. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Jamie Schwartzman. Today, I'm excited. We're going to be talking to Atlantic Avenue. They're an interesting district in Brooklyn, New York, known for their retail, indie boutiques, a really interesting area. And we'll be speaking with Kelly Carroll today. She's the executive director of that bid. I think it's going to be fascinating to hear a little bit about what's going on in that area, how its dynamics are different from some of the other spots. So let's welcome her to the podcast. Kelly, how are you today? And welcome.
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
How's everything today in Atlantic Avenue?
Atlantic Avenue is doing great. It's just a little humid here in Brooklyn today.
Yeah, it's summertime. We're recording this podcast July 2024. So, Kelly, tell us a little bit about your district and what it's all about.
Absolutely. So Atlantic Avenue is one of the oldest streets in Brooklyn. It was originally the southernmost boundary of the village of Brooklyn, and we have the world's oldest subway beneath the street, and most of the shops and buildings that line this avenue date to prior to the Civil War. So we have some fantastic architecture, little boutique jewel box stores, and it's a street unique even within the massive context of New York City.
So, I think you're my first conversation with somebody in New York State. So tell us a little bit about how your place management organization is structured and financed.
For sure. So we are a business improvement district. Some places they're called neighborhood improvement districts. So BIDs or BIDs in New York City, we are one of 76 of them, and we are financed by a special tax assessment based on real property. So if you own property within our legislatively created district, which is a boundary that takes in some side street retail and basically the full length of Atlantic Avenue, that special tax assessment goes to the Department of Finance, which then gives us the money back as a pot. And then we use that pot of money to directly inject the avenue with improvements.
And tell me a little bit about how the tax assessments work in your district. It was interesting how you explained it to me.
Yeah, so our specific formula, every district is different. In New York City, we have a formula based on frontage. So if you have one of these small jewel box shops that I mentioned, you will pay significantly less than, say, the Trader Joe grocery store, which is on a corner location, which has a 50-foot frontage and takes in the part of a side street. So those bigger buildings with larger frontages will pay more, while the little guys will pay less. And it's all actually quite affordable.
Good, great. So as executive director, what's your role? What keeps you busy every day?
Every day is full of surprises here. I would say a typical day involves directly talking to merchants, consulting with my clean team about incidences of illegal dumping or new graffiti that appeared overnight, as well as doing a walk of the district every day to make sure that our trees and our horticulture that we take care of is hydrated and looking healthy. We also are reactive to strange things that happen, such as we're a mapped truck route. And so there's a lot of signals and a lot of traffic infrastructure that can suddenly stop working, or a pedestrian signal can be knocked over. This has happened at least a dozen times in the past year, where then we have actually like a public safety issue. We've had other issues of car accidents. We've had also, the occasional crime that I'll have to react to. But the community is so tight knit that most of the businesses have a text chain. And so if there's someone suspicious walking down the avenue, they flag that. I'm always clued in. And we also, we close a street on the weekends for free public programming. This past Friday night, we had a stand-up comedy show. So that's a lot of work to manage, because closing the cars to any street in New York City makes cars very unhappy. So it's a lot of on the ground, and it's a lot of interacting with the street and the people who use it.
So give us a kind of like order of magnitude. You said 76 bids in New York City. So where do you guys fall on that spectrum? Are you one of the largers or one of the smallers?
We are considered a small bid. So small bids in New York are considered bids with budgets or assessment value, that tax assessment I mentioned, under $500,000. So there's little bids like us, then there's medium size bids. I would say places like Soho, and then there's the big bids, those places like the Financial District in Lower Manhattan, which is called the Downtown Alliance, or the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, or the Times Square Alliance, places like that are just taken entire central business districts, whereas our bid focuses on a specific geography of a particular street.
Got it. And let's tell us a little bit about you, Kelly. How did you get into this work and what inspired you to do it?
Absolutely. So my background professionally is in historic preservation and community outreach. And while in grad school, I did take several urban planning classes. And typically these roles are for urban planners, people interested in the urban realm, the public realm. And prior to this, I worked in advocacy and specifically with historic preservation and landmarking. And all of that work looked like working with various city agencies, working with community boards, working with block associations, working with partner organizations, building coalitions to achieve change. And this district was ideal because we have 4 designated historic districts here, including New York City's first, which is the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. And so when this opportunity came along, it really seemed like the perfect marriage of my past and my future.
Why don't you walk us through a little bit about how that works, and some of our other districts might gain or learn a couple of points from that.
Sure. So it's actually quite simple. So I've mentioned that we have these beautiful storefronts. What we'll do is they're always photographed in a particular way. So there's minimal sidewalk. It'll be minimal building above the storefront itself. So it's always.
And do you guys photograph it?
Yes. So I have a background in architectural photography because of my previous work, and so I'm very particular on how the buildings and the storefronts are photographed. They always have to be dead on, never from the side, never crooked, only of the storefront itself. And then because of these, a lot of these storefronts are historic. They have woodwork that's very special, or they're painted a particular color. Another thing that's unique is our storefronts actually project into the sidewalk. They're not flat, because back in the day, people were really smart and they would build the storefronts out so that when you were walking down the street, you could see the products as you're coming down the sidewalk. So we emphasize these special conditions of our architecture, and we have a hashtag called Open for Business, so that it'll connect back to every post we've ever done. And we will put this on typically Instagram, which is the most interacted with in terms of businesses. For other community events and things like that, we tap more into Facebook, which is more community oriented. But for business, it seems that Instagram is our number one vehicle for engagement. And we will write a short description of the storefront, the address, the name of the broker, the contact information, and we'll also usually give a description of other shops that are on the block and a general vibe of why it's good to do business on Atlantic Avenue.
So, what you're finding the way that the buildings and the properties and the spaces are shown makes a difference, and also helping people understand what's nearby and getting a real hyper-local familiarization.
Exactly.
What are some of the challenges going on in the district right now? You mentioned a couple during our prep session.
Yeah, a couple of challenges. I would say our largest challenge is that the way that pedestrians use this street and the way that vehicles use this street are completely disparate. We are a mapped freight route, which means that we get heavy truck traffic including 18-wheelers, which is very unusual to see on a New York City street this old. And we also are a direct feeder route to the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, which is an expressway interchange designed in the early 1950s. And it is extremely dangerous. At the time it was built, nobody would have gone past the expressway because that was a working waterfront and it had industrial uses. Now that waterfront is this world-class Brooklyn Bridge Park, which people are going to all of the time, and is amazing that we have an entrance to it. But however, it is dangerous to access the park because of this very poorly mid-century urban design. And just like every other bid in New York City, we struggle with the rats in some of our tree pits, especially on blocks where we have dining establishments. It's such an issue in New York City right now that it's become a mayoral priority. So I don't feel bad or that our street is more ratty than another, because it really is a citywide issue right now that commercial districts with dining establishments are all struggling with.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about data and what's going on in the area. Share with us, what you're tracking around vacancies and data, and familiarize us with what's happening in the district.
Sure. Because we are a small bid, we don't keep as fine and granular data as a district like Times Square, who has step counts for every block, for example. But we do track vacancy, and that is provided to us via help through the city, who has hired a third party to provide this data to all small New York City bids. And we have a lower vacancy rate now than pre-pandemic, which is basically the bar for commercial districts to measure their success by. If you can get to where you were at a vacancy level in February 2020, that's like, okay, we've had what they call like complete recovery. If you are lower than that, then you're experiencing a lot of vitality. And if you're higher than that, it shows that your district has not completely recovered from COVID. So our vacancy is about 4% lower than we were in February of 2020, which is fantastic. And we're having new businesses open monthly here.
And is this, do you have an office and a residential component as well?
We have, yes, we do. So office space is not so much. The office spaces that we have actually operate as storefronts for the most part. So they're in the same type of like spaces where a boutique might be. Instead there's desks and some computers in there. So we have some architecture and design studios like this. Our council member Lincoln Ressler has an office behind a storefront like this. And then for the most part, I'd say 90% of the district is ground floor retail, and there's residences above. And for the buildings that are typical of our building stock, they were purpose-built this way starting in the 1850s. There was commercial activity even back then. And so instead of constructing a row house just as a row house, these buildings were always built with a commercial use on the bottom because of the long history of commerce of this street. There was a ferry connection here to Lower Manhattan, beginning in the 1830s. The Long Island Railroad was here also in the 1830s. So all of this mass transportation infrastructure brought a lot of commerce here.
You mentioned also that, the retail that's there is small, they're craft, they're artisanal. What do you think it is that attracts them to your district?
That is a really great question, because something special is happening on Atlantic Avenue, which a lot of people have compared to the Soho of the late 70s and 80s, and of these creators and these loft spaces, and this kind of organic outflow of creative product and services. I think Atlantic Avenue it has that because we're very close to where people live. So unlike other commercial districts, which take in lots of blocks of commercial activity, we are really bookended by brownstone Brooklyn neighborhoods, neighborhoods like Brooklyn Heights, Cobble Hill, Borum Hill. And there's a lot of people that live and work very close to here. And I think that for a time, the rents were low enough that you could come to Atlantic Avenue. You weren't going to pay Soho prices, but you could do these things in these spaces. They're big enough. They get amazing light and air. We have incredible subway connectivity. That this was a place that is centrally located, like a downtown Brooklyn location, but we're not in a skyscraper district. We're in a low rise, like residential district almost. So we're very close to a lot of populations.
So do you see, that, digital tools, dashboards, data visualization, does that play a part in sort of you guys achieving your objectives?
I would say absolutely. For example, we're very proud of our vacancy rate. We have a beautiful GIS map of all our businesses that you can sort by category, and our use of email is incredibly helpful. We have a professional newsletter that goes out once a month that has an open rate of about 62%. Typical nonprofit open rates are usually around 20%. So we are triple the average nonprofit. And this digital content has such a following that the local newspaper actually reprints our newsletter in the paper. So people then have it delivered by mail as well. So we're everywhere.
And about how big is that list?
Oh, their list is...
No, your list. Your list of the emails that go out, just to give a sense of...
subscribers, it's under 2,000. So it's small, 2,000 and growing.
Right, but small but mighty.
Yes.
Got it. Interesting. So let's talk about this year. Okay, so we're now July 2024. Let's map things out 1 year, July 2025. What are you hoping to get done in the next 1 year?
Well, in the next 1 year, we're hoping to hear any day now about a grant that we applied for that would allow us to beautify the underpass of the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, which is the connector to this park that I've been talking about. We applied for the full amount of $50,000. This would immensely help the foot traffic, which is another economic development issue, and get people from that park to come shop and dine on Atlantic Avenue. So we're hoping for that. I am also working on another grant, which we've successfully received the past 2 years, which would increase some of our marketing, our imagery. Specifically, we're going to be redoing our shopping guide, which is a printed guide that we distribute to all of the storefronts, and hotels. We have some hotels adjacent to us, and the tourists don't want to go eat at Applebee's. They want to come look at a real Brooklyn street, and that's us. So that is another big goal. We are also going to be conducting some community activation around the history of the streets. So some walking tours that get people out to learn about why this place is special, in addition to doing business here. So to create more tourism initiatives here. And we are also working on increasing our budget by about 62%, and that hopefully will enter the legislative process this year.
Busy year.
Busy year.
Interesting. Let's move the mileposts out another 5 years. What do you see happening in the district in that horizon?
5 years from now, if all goes up as planned, we will no longer be considered a small bid, because the assessment increase I have applied for will sit us at over $600,000. And so with that type of assessment, we would be able to make serious capital improvements here. things like making sure that all of our sanitation is containerized and branded, making sure that everyone who does business here has a beautiful published, dedicated journal of what it is that we do, because not everyone understands that. And 5 years from now, I don't know if I will be here, but I hope to have this organization running like a machine and having Atlantic Avenue more green than ever. New York City currently has a council goal to have a 30% tree canopy within the next 15 years or so. And I take that very seriously. There's a lot of data that shows that where there are trees and greenery, consumers will actually spend more time on the street because it's cooler, it looks prettier, it feels more like a place where someone wants to be. And of course, the longer people stay in a commercial district, the more likely they are to maybe get hungry or need a coffee, and therefore they're spending more dollars and cents. So I hope to leave Atlantic Avenue more the greenest it's ever been, the cleanest it's ever been, and having an impactful visual experience of public art, which currently is not here.
Kelly, how long have you been in the role of executive director?
I have been here about 1.5 years. It will be 2 years in October.
And how about prior to your arrival? How long was that executive director in their role?
I believe less than 1 year. There was a lot of bumps between spring of 2020 until I was hired in October of 22.
Granted, I mean, you're talking about the pandemic here and all the big changes, of course, right?
Exactly. And New York City, the more I speak with people who are not from New York or were not in COVID during that time, the experience that we had here in New York City is unlike other parts, any other part of the country that I've learned. New York City we were closed. We were on pause. We were home, and it changed everything. And whereas other places, you could still be safe in your car, for example, and take a drive just to get out. We were on lockdown. South Carolina was open. Like you could eat inside in South Carolina. I didn't eat inside a restaurant until well into 2021. And I remember the first time I did. It was a big deal.
Wow. Let's shift gears one more time, and we're going to play make-believe, and we're going to pretend that you've been handed a magic wand and you know how to use it, and you're going to use it to transform things, to promote the vitality of Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. Kelly Carroll, how are you going to use your magic wand?
My magic wand would close Hoyt Street, which is the street we close to cars, and close it and pedestrianized Hoyt Street as a public plaza, like what they do in Europe. I would pedestrianize it to the next biggest retail corridor, which is Fulton Street. So it would be about 4 blocks of no traffic. And there would be plantings and maybe some water features and tables where people can sit outside without having to buy something and enjoy life. And my other magic wand would be getting rid of the Brooklyn Queens Expressway disaster of on-ramps that prevent foot traffic from entering our district from Brooklyn Bridge Park. Either that going below grade and we have a beautiful greenscaped connector to that, or it being closed in general. That would be my magic wand. We do not have public space here for people to pause. There's nowhere to sit. We have no plaza. We have no park. We have not even a little triangle where people can put a bench and light a tree lighting, for example. So that would be amazing.
Before we wrap up, how can our listeners keep an eye on what's happening in Atlantic Avenue and maybe keep track of you and your work?
I would love our listeners today to follow us on Instagram, which is at Atlantic Ave BK, at like Avenue for short, AVE. everything there connects back to our website. Everything we're doing is posted there. We do a lot of fantastic content that's beyond commercial. We feature neighborhood pets. We feature history themes. We feature new businesses. We feature people in the neighborhood. So it's really great stuff, and that is how you should follow us.
And just a quick question on your Instagram content. How do you guys produce great content, and what's the strategy there?
That's an excellent question, and something that I rearranged when I took over. I realized that it takes a very long time to build a great street, right? There's things that we have that you can't construct. Like we have, for example, hundreds of years of old architecture that's visually stunning. We have very big, huge tree canopies. Like aesthetically, we are gorgeous and what one thinks of when they think of like storybook Brooklyn. And so I wanted to make sure that those images were always highlighted so people know what we look and feel like. The other thing that's distinctive about our district is that Atlantic Avenue has all these little tiny side streets that have retail on them that have typically been ignored. And I needed to figure out a way of how we could highlight them so that, because they pay also, so they should be receiving the same caliber of attention as Atlantic Avenue businesses. So I started a campaign called Side Street Saturday. And Side Street Saturday focuses on not only our side street businesses, but activities happening on our side streets, like the one that I close. So we have a seemingly endless stream of content, either about a shop on a side street that you may have never heard of, or something that you can come do for free on the weekend, like go to a Pilates class like we had on Saturday, or come hear a string quartet. So it has taken a life of its own, and I've gotten a lot of feedback that people, we can't wait to see what the Side Street Saturday is going to be this week. Our corridor is also a massive dog corridor. It seems that everybody here has a dog, and the shops all give dog treats out. So the dogs actually have treat routes where they pull owners into the shops themselves because they know who has treats. And so to, again, exploit what we already have, that's amazing, we decided to come up with Atlantic Animals. So every couple of weeks or so, we'll have user-submitted pets of Atlantic. And the criteria is to make sure that we're always, aiming toward an economic development end, is just to make sure that the pet's favorite local business is always called out, so that when we do the post of a person's pet, we can say that, Fluffy is a 4-year-old lab mix and her favorite shop is Free Range Wines on Atlantic Avenue. And then we tag the business, the pet owner's happy, and then people then like the picture because most people like pictures of animals.
And so, it sounds like a lot of work. Who's doing all that work?
Mostly my staff member, Layla Passman.
I see. So you have a staff member who's, a big chunk of her time is dedicated to content?
Absolutely. Yes. And we come up with it together, and I will often photograph, and we'll share photographs. We have so many photos that we share each week. But it is the two of us who are running this whole operation.
So great. Painting pictures that tell 1,000 words.
Exactly.
Excellent. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. Really cool conversation that we had together.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was great.
Cool. And to our listeners, thanks again for joining us on Decoding Downtowns. I'm Jamie Schwartzman, and a big shout out to Vistity for sponsoring the podcast. Until next time, keep exploring and innovating in your district.
Thank you for joining us today for Decoding Downtowns. If you've enjoyed our podcast, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's brought to you by Vistity, the leading geospatial visualization platform for data-driven decisions. Stay connected, stay informed, and let's continue to shape the future of our cities together. Until next time, I'm Jamie Schwartzman.